Hello. One of the greatest mysteries in human history is not hidden in outer space, but in our inner world, consciousness. How is it that within the gray folds of the brain, thoughts, emotions, dreams, and a sense of self arise? For centuries, philosophers, scientists, and thinkers have pursued this question. Some have identified consciousness with the soul, others have seen it merely as a biological byproduct. Today, from neuroscience to quantum theory, from artificial intelligence to philosophical inquiry, many fields offer different clues about the nature of consciousness. Is the thing we call I really nothing more than electrical circuits in the brain? Or is there a deeper reality embedded in the fabric of the universe, beyond our perceptions? In this episode, we will journey into the secrets of the mind. Starting from the biological workings of the brain, we will move through theories of consciousness, virtual reality experiences, and quantum debates, and revisit one of the most fundamental questions of being human. What is reality, and who are we? Defining consciousness, a reality beyond wakefulness. Consciousness, a mysterious state of existence that we experience every day, but struggle to explain. Beginning the moment we open our eyes in the morning, this process allows us to perceive our surroundings, recognize ourselves, and direct our thoughts. For centuries, it has attracted the attention of philosophers, scientists, and artists. But what is consciousness really? Is it simply being awake? Or is it a more complex reality that forms the basis of our existence? Consciousness from a neurological perspective. Modern neuroscience reduces consciousness to the functioning of the brain. The complex communication network of neurons, the activity of specific cortical regions, and synaptic transmissions are considered the building blocks of consciousness. In particular, the prefrontal cortex, thalamus, anterior cingulate cortex, and parietal lobes play key roles in the emergence of awareness and conscious perception. From a neurological point of view, consciousness is divided into two main components: wakefulness and awareness. Wakefulness is the general active state of the brain. Awareness is the capacity to respond to both external stimuli and internal experiences. However, this definition means viewing consciousness purely as a physical process. Yet consciousness is more complex than something that can be fully explained by signals passing back and forth. Consciousness from a psychological perspective. In psychology, consciousness is treated as the mental plane through which an individual can access their internal states, thoughts, and emotions. Freud pioneered this field by dividing the mind into conscious, preconscious, and unconscious. Modern cognitive psychology, on the other hand, centers on conscious attention, short-term memory, and decision-making processes. Psychologically, for a person to be conscious means not only perceiving the external world, but also interpreting that perception, evaluating it, and acting on that interpretation. From this perspective, consciousness is the awareness of thought. Consciousness from a philosophical perspective. Philosophy discusses consciousness on a deeper and more abstract level. Descartes' famous statement, "I think, therefore I am," presents consciousness as the fundamental proof of existence. The mind-body problem is one of the central philosophical questions. Is consciousness a product of the physical brain, or is it an immaterial, subjective reality? Dualism argues that the mind is separate from the body, while physicalism claims that consciousness can be fully explained by the brain. More modern approaches, such as panpsychism, suggest that everything in the universe carries some form of consciousness. These debates remain unresolved, and attempts to explain consciousness represent one of the longest intellectual journeys in human history. Can it be defined, or only experienced? Perhaps trying to define consciousness is like trying to describe the taste of water in words. It is a reality everyone experiences, but no one can fully express. The philosopher Thomas Nagel's famous question, "What is it like to be a bat?" captures this well. A bat perceives its environment via sonar waves. We can observe this, but we can never truly experience perceiving as a bat does, never truly be a bat. In the same way, we can observe another person's consciousness, but we cannot know their inner experience. For this reason, consciousness is a phenomenon that science tries to measure, yet one that always preserves its subjective nature. Architect of the brain. The path from neurons to mind. Where exactly is the thing we call consciousness formed? Where is a thought born? At what moment is a decision made? What is the exact source of an emotion? All of these questions lead us to the complex structure of the brain and its extraordinary functioning. The brain is not just an organ. It is the mind itself, the physical basis of our thoughts, memories, perceptions, and emotions. So how does this complex structure work? Neurons, the bricks of the mind. The brain contains roughly 86 billion neurons. These cells communicate with one another at connection points called synapses. Each neuron sends thousands of electrical and chemical signals per second, interacting with its neighbors. This communication network shapes our thoughts, emotions, and behaviors. Communication between nerve cells occurs through changes in electrical potential, action potentials, and through chemical messengers known as neurotransmitters. Substances like dopamine, serotonin, and glutamate directly affect both our mood and our cognitive processes. For example, a lack of dopamine can lead to Parkinson's disease, while excessive dopamine activity can be associated with schizophrenia. Neural networks, from simplicity to complexity. The function of a single neuron is limited, but the organized activity of billions of neurons produces an incredibly complex and dynamic system. Neural networks. Different regions of the brain specialize in different functions. Visual information is processed in the occipital lobe. Auditory information in the temporal lobe. Motor control in the frontal lobe. Integration of sensory data in the parietal lobe. Emotions and memory in the limbic system. Yet none of these regions work alone. They are constantly synchronized with one another. When we look at an object, not only our visual cortex, but also our memory, attention, decision-making systems, and even emotional circuits become active. Thanks to this holistic interaction, we do not merely see, we also assign meaning. Plasticity, the brain's changing nature. It was once thought that the brain was a fixed structure. Today we know that it is plastic. In other words, it is shaped by experience, changes over time, and forms new connections. This property is called neural plasticity. For instance, the area of the brain devoted to the language we learn as children differs from the area engaged by a foreign language learned later in life. After an injury, the brain can sometimes transfer the function of a damaged region to other areas. When we acquire new skills, the brain responds to this process physically as well. Conscious experiences leave traces not only mentally, but biologically. Mind, a network that goes beyond matter. Neurons, synapses, and neurotransmitters are physical entities. But is the mind that emerges from their interaction nothing more than the sum of these parts? Some theories describe the mind as an emergent property. That is, consciousness does not arise from the individual functions of neurons, but from the interactions between them, as a new kind of entity. This is often compared to water. Its properties are different from those of the individual H2O molecules. The mind arises from the brain, but explaining it remains one of modern science's greatest struggles. A system that knows itself, metacognition and self-awareness. The moment we notice that we are thinking, that inner question, what am I feeling right now? This is not merely thinking, but thinking about thought. This capacity is called metacognition, and it is one of the most sophisticated functions of the human mind. Metacognition, the mind, observing the mind. Metacognition is the ability to monitor, evaluate, and, when necessary, regulate our own cognitive processes. It appears in questions like, did I really understand this topic? Why did I make this decision? Am I being attentive enough right now? More effective learning, memory, and problem-solving are directly linked to metacognitive awareness. This awareness is connected not only to academic success, but also to emotional intelligence, self-control, and social skills. Self-awareness. Looking at yourself in the mirror. Self-awareness is the ability of an individual to observe themselves as if they were an object. Human beings do not only perceive the world, they can also perceive themselves. A neural network called the default mode network becomes active when a person is not directly engaged with the external world. This network is thought to be closely related to self-awareness and inner thought. The mirror test is a classic method used to study self-awareness in animals. Chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, and some bird species have passed this test, showing that they can recognize their own reflection. Humans, however, carry this awareness much further. We can not only perceive ourselves, but also think about how others perceive us. This is known as external self-awareness. The neurological basis of self-awareness. Self-awareness requires coordinated activity across multiple brain regions. In particular, the prefrontal cortex, posterior cingulate cortex, and insula are associated with self-perception and inner thought. When these regions are damaged, a person's sense of self can be disrupted. In some neurological conditions, for example, patients may no longer recognize a part of their own body as belonging to them, as in asometognosia. This confirms that self-awareness has a biological foundation. The social mind and empathy, metacognition, and self-awareness are not only important on an individual level, but are also critical in social contexts. And to be able to guess what someone else is feeling, to imagine their point of view, to balance our own emotions with those of others. All of this is made possible by advanced self-awareness and by theory of mind, the capacity to understand other minds. In conditions such as autism spectrum disorder, these social mind skills may be limited. This shows that metacognition is not only a mental tool, but also a social one. Perceiving reality. The world the brain builds. How do we perceive our surroundings? A color, a sound, a smell? Are these things truly out there in the external world? Or are they internal representations produced by the brain? The human mind does not simply receive data from the environment in a passive way. It actively constructs them. The world we see is not a direct reflection of external reality. It is a narrative that the brain interprets, completes, and turns into meaning. The senses and selective perception. Our five senses, sight, hearing, taste, smell, and touch, collect information from the outside world. Yet the signals they send are raw data. The brain organizes this data, integrates it with the background, and makes it meaningful. This process is called perception. Perception is shaped not only by external stimuli, but also by mental expectations, past experiences, and our focus of attention. For example, while walking in a crowded street, we may only hear our own name being called, a sign of selective perception. Attention does not just determine what we turn our eyes toward, but what our brain chooses to prioritize. Illusions. The flaws of reality. Visual illusions show that perception is not absolute. A line may appear longer than another. Colors may look different depending on their surroundings, or we may sense motion where there is none. These illusions arise because the brain tries to generate meaning using shortcuts and approximations. Sometimes this process can break away from reality altogether. Delusions, false beliefs about reality. Hallucinations, perceiving things that are not actually there. These phenomena, often seen in psychiatric disorders such as schizophrenia, strikingly reveal how the brain processes reality. Predictive brain theory. Is reality a simulation? One of the prominent modern theories, predictive coding, suggests that the brain constantly predicts incoming sensory information and primarily processes the differences between its predictions and the actual input. In other words, we do not experience the external world directly. We experience the brain's predictions about it. According to this view, Perception is a kind of virtual reality generated by the brain. Inputs from the outside world serve mainly to correct this internal simulation. And this brings us to a profound question. Is reality what we see, or only what we think we are seeing? Dream or reality? Altered states of consciousness. Consciousness is not active only when we are awake. On the contrary, the human mind can flow between different states of consciousness. Sleep, dreaming, hypnosis, deep meditation and trance-like states show just how flexible and many-layered consciousness can be. These altered states are not only experiences in themselves, they are also unique opportunities for exploring the limits of consciousness. Sleep and dreams, the night shift of consciousness. Sleep may look like a state in which consciousness is temporarily switched off, but in reality the brain is highly active during sleep. Especially in REM sleep, rapid eye movement, brain waves closely resemble those seen in wakefulness. The dreams of this phase are inner simulations in which our sense of time, space, and self is reshaped. Dreams have often been interpreted as the expression of unconscious desires, fears, or the processing of information from the day. For Freud, dreams were symbolic expressions of repressed drives. For Jung, they were filled with universal images of the collective unconscious. Modern neuroscience, however, tends to see dreams as the nervous system's effort to reorganize and consolidate itself. Lucid dreaming. Dreaming with awareness. Some people know that they are dreaming while they dream, and this awareness allows them to influence the flow of the dream. This is called lucid dreaming. In a lucid dream, the dreamer occupies both a dream state and a state of awareness. Because this involves conscious decision-making and a sense of self, it is of great scientific interest. It has become a research topic, especially in cognitive therapy and in the treatment of post-traumatic stress disorder. Hypnosis and trance. Deep focus in consciousness. Hypnosis is a state in which a person's awareness of the external world decreases, but their openness to suggestion increases. Clinical hypnosis is used to control pain, treat phobias, and manage addictions. Yet even in hypnosis, a person does not completely lose control. Consciousness is still present, but operating in a different mode. Similarly, trance states encountered in some religious and cultural practices are altered forms of consciousness. Through dance, rhythm, breathing exercises, or intense concentration, people can reach states in which their sense of time and space is transformed. Meditation, deepening consciousness. Meditation is the practice of transforming consciousness through focused attention or awareness. In deep meditative states, people may feel that the boundaries of the self temporarily dissolve. Neuroscientific studies have shown structural and functional changes in regions such as the anterior cingulate cortex, insula, and prefrontal cortex in long-term meditators. This demonstrates that the mind is not just a passive field of experience, but something that can be actively shaped.